Have you ever wondered how Cain, one of the first children of Adam and Eve, could find a wife and start a family when the Bible asserts that Adam and Eve were the only initial parents of humanity? This question may seem complex and even mysterious, but when we delve deeply into the Bible's verses and combine them with the historical context of humanity at that time, unexpected and interesting answers can emerge, shedding light on the beginning of mankind. To answer such questions, we need to carefully study the creation and the relationships between characters in the Bible. According to the book of Genesis, the creation of Adam and Eve was a milestone event, not only in the Bible, but in the entire story of humanity. Adam was created by God from dust, and God breathed life into him, making him the first living being. Then, from Adam's rib, God created Eve, the first woman, establishing the first marriage of mankind. This marked not only the beginning of life, but also the foundation for a sacred relationship between God and humans, serving as the basis for the entire biblical narrative that followed. After Adam and Eve were created and lived in the Garden of Eden, they gave birth to their first children, including Cain and Abel. Cain and Abel grew up in a new world, but were quickly challenged by the hardships of life. Cain became a farmer, working the fields and tilling the soil, while Abel took up shepherding, tending his flock. Both were aware of God's presence and expressed gratitude by offering sacrifices to him. Cain offered the fruits of his labor from the land, while Abel presented the best lambs from his flock. However, God accepted Abel's offering with pleasure, as it was given with all sincerity and care, while Cain's offering, according to many interpretations, may not have been offered with the same level of sincerity and reverence as Abel's. God's rejection of Cain's offering deeply hurt him, leading to envy toward Abel. This envy grew within Cain's heart, transforming into uncontrollable anger. God, perceiving Cain's inner turmoil, warned him that uncontrolled anger leads to sin. God advised Cain that sin lies in wait at the door, but he could resist it if he learned to control his emotions. Despite God's counsel, Cain remained consumed by negative feelings. One day, Cain invited Abel to go out into the field. In a secluded place, away from prying eyes, Cain's anger reached its peak. In a fit of rage and jealousy, Cain attacked and killed Abel, marking the first murder in human history. This event not only led to Abel's death, but also introduced a new dimension of sin and suffering into the world God had created. After this horrifying act, God confronted Cain, asking him about Abel's whereabouts. Cain, in an attempt to hide his guilt, replied coldly, "And without remorse I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper?" This response not only reflected indifference, but also showed Cain's refusal to take responsibility. However, God, knowing the truth, passed judgment on Cain, punishing him by cursing him and turning him into a wanderer with no home on the earth. Cain's reaction to God's curse revealed his anxiety and fear for the future. He expressed concern that he would wander aimlessly, unprotected, and feared that someone might find him and seek revenge for Abel's death. In response to Cain's worry, God placed a mark on him. This mark was meant to protect Cain from any revenge that might be taken against him. Although the Bible does not describe the mark in detail, it ensured that Cain would not be killed by others, despite facing the curse. After this dialogue with God, Cain left God's presence and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. The Bible then mentions that Cain met his wife, and they had a son named Enoch. Additionally, it is stated that Cain built a city and named it after his son Enoch. The construction of this city was a significant milestone in the story, marking the beginning of the establishment of human communities. However, it is here that questions start to arise. The text does not provide clear details on how Cain met his wife. In Genesis 4:17, we only know that Cain lived with his wife. The possibility of the existence of other people besides Adam, Eve, Cain, and Abel is an interpretation that tries to fill the gaps in the biblical story, and address issues related to the human population increase. Cain's fear that he would be killed by others and the mark placed on him by God, as described in the Bible, raise important questions about the presence of other people beyond Adam and Eve. In Genesis 4:14, Cain says, "Today you are driving me from the land, and I will be hidden from your presence. I will be a restless wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me." This fear seems to imply the existence of a significant population for Cain to be concerned about being discovered and punished by a group of individuals. In the following passage, the Bible quotes, "But the Lord said to him, 'Not so, anyone who kills Cain will suffer vengeance 7 times over.' Then the Lord put a mark on Cain so that no one who found him would kill him." These clues help us understand that in the context of the Bible's story, the earth may have had a larger population beyond Adam and Eve's family. Cain's fear of being found and God's intervention to protect him imply the presence of other people outside the main characters in the story, suggesting a broader and widespread population connected to the first family. One of the less accepted interpretations is that aside from Adam and Eve's family, God may have created other people independently. Proponents of this theory argue that to explain the rapid population growth described in the Bible, a significant number of people would be required, something that could only be achieved by the creation of additional individuals beyond Adam and Eve's descendants. This theory tries to reconcile the biblical story with archaeological and anthropological evidence, pointing to the existence of complex human societies in ancient times. Evidence such as the existence of early human settlements and remnants of ancient human communities suggest a larger population scenario. However, it is important to note that this theory remains speculative and is not directly supported by the biblical text. The story of Genesis focuses on Adam and Eve's family without explicitly mentioning any other groups of people at the same time. The Bible does not provide further details on the creation of other humans outside of the first family, keeping the story focused and specific. Therefore, while this theory attempts to align the biblical story with scientific findings, it remains a hypothesis and is debated among scholars and theologians. A more popular theory is that Cain may have married a sister or niece, based on the cultural practices and context of the time described in the Bible. The Bible in Genesis does not say that Adam and Eve only had Cain and Abel as children. In fact, in Genesis 4:1, Eve says, "I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord," referring to Cain, but there is no similar statement after Abel's birth, suggesting that there may have been other children born between these events. The lack of detailed information about other children between Cain and Abel has led to speculation among some scholars and theologians that Adam and Eve had a larger family than what is directly described. According to the cultural and historical understanding of the time, families were often large, and the lack of specific restrictions in the biblical text allows for the possibility that Cain may have married a sister or a close relative. This theory is supported by the mention of other sons and daughters of Adam and Eve in Genesis 5:4, after the birth of Seth, where it says Adam had other sons and daughters. This suggests a larger lineage beyond the specifically mentioned children. Thus, the biblical text does not limit the descendants of Adam and Eve to just Cain, Abel, and Seth, allowing for a broader interpretation of the number of family members. It is important to note that in the absence of a significant population outside of Adam and Eve's family, the idea that Cain married a sister emerges as a reasonable solution to maintain the human lineage within the cultural and time context of the biblical story. Marriages between siblings or close relatives were considered acceptable, even necessary, to continue the development of humanity. This theory fits with the unique circumstances described in the Bible, where there were no specific prohibitions against sibling marriage in the early stages of human history. On the contrary, the Bible provides numerous examples of marriages between close relatives. One prominent example is the story of Noah's sons after the great flood. Noah and his wife, along with their sons Shem, Ham, and Japheth, were the only survivors to continue the human lineage. Noah's sons had to marry each other or their sisters, as no one else remained. Another important example is the marriage between Abraham and Sarah, his half-sister. The Bible in Genesis 20:12 confirms that Abraham and Sarah had the same father, meaning they were half-siblings. At that time, marriages between close relatives like half-siblings were acceptable and often necessary to preserve the family line. Isaac, Abraham's son, followed this custom when he married Rebekah, his cousin. Marriages between cousins were a common practice, reflecting the cultural norms of ancient society. Similarly, Jacob, Abraham's grandson, also married the daughters of Laban, his cousins. These marriages, although they may be considered unusual today, were established norms in ancient times to ensure the continuity of the family lineage. It is important to note that the laws prohibiting marriages between close relatives, described in the Mosaic Law, were established long after these events, approximately 2,500 years after the creation of Adam and Eve. These laws, part of the covenant given to Moses, established stricter moral and social standards, reflecting the development of cultural norms and the need to protect genetic health, as well as social order in a more complex society. The Bible story often focuses on Cain and Abel, the two most famous sons of Adam and Eve. Interestingly, in many cases, Jewish and Christian traditions have overlooked the stories of the lesser-known characters, placing more emphasis on the dramatic stories. And this tendency sometimes obscures the presence and paths of other sons and daughters of the first family, who also played significant roles in shaping the foundation of human history. Although the Bible in Genesis 5:4 mentions that Adam and Eve had other sons and daughters besides Cain and Abel, it seems that the absence of specific names for these daughters has contributed to their stories becoming obscure, while Cain and Abel have been emphasized more. But on the other hand, it is also understandable that the Bible cannot detail the lives of everyone. It is difficult to record all the information from the creation of the world to its end in one book. In this context, non-canonical books like the Book of Jubilees have emerged as alternative sources, exploring more details about lesser-known characters, including the daughters of Adam and Eve. These forgotten figures provide a broader view of the richness of the first couple's lineage. However, it is important to note that the Book of Jubilees is considered non-canonical, meaning it is not an official part of the Jewish or Christian biblical canon. In simple terms, it is not considered a divinely inspired text by mainstream religions, primarily due to its inconsistent authorship and origin, as well as differing interpretations from widely accepted versions. Nevertheless, the historical significance of the Book of Jubilees cannot be overlooked. It offers a unique perspective on events recounted in Genesis, particularly those related to creation, Adam and Eve, and other Old Testament figures. Its nickname, Little Genesis, reflects its direct connection to the events and characters depicted in Genesis. This non-canonical book provides a deeper interpretation of the story, going beyond what is found in the Bible, including mentioning the names of Adam and Eve's daughters and their lives. This story is particularly meaningful to some Jewish and Christian communities who seek a deeper understanding of key Old Testament events. When we examine the Book of Jubilees to find the names of Adam and Eve's daughters, we encounter the characters of Kulima and Azura, who are identified as the wives of Cain and Seth, respectively. In Genesis 4:16-17, we read Cain went out from the Lord's presence and lived in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Cain made love to his wife, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Enoch's Cain, then built a city and named it after his son, Enoch. In some Jewish traditions, Kulima, also known as Avon, is recognized as Cain's wife, the first son of Adam and Eve. Although her name does not appear in the Bible, She is mentioned in non-canonical texts such as the Book of Jubilees. Her name's meaning, originating from Hebrew or Phoenician, may imply sin or strength as Cain's wife. Her name may symbolize the strength or influence she brought to Cain's lineage, the first son of Adam and Eve. Simultaneously, the meaning associated with sin may reflect the trials and hardships that Cain and Quelima faced after their exile. Cain met Aven, and the biblical story emphasizes that he built the city of Enoch, naming it after his son. The Book of Jubilees also mentions this city as one of Cain's accomplishments after the tragic event involving Abel. Presented parallel to Cain, Aven emerges as a significant link in his lineage, becoming a central figure in the important events following Cain's exile due to Abel's murder. Although it is true that the biblical text does not identify Cain's wife's name or origin, when reviewing the sections of Genesis leading up to Cain's exile and his meeting with this woman, few characters are mentioned outside of Adam, Eve, and their siblings. However, it is important to consider that by the time Cain met Aven, the earth was likely populated by many people. At this point in the story, there were certainly more than just 5 people, including women other than Eve. Some speculate that Cain's wife may have been his niece, the daughter of Seth. This idea is based on the long time between Cain's exile and his meeting with Aven. Some theologians suggest that this period lasted about 300 years. During this time, it is estimated that Adam's number of sons and daughters exceeded 50, and Seth's number of sons exceeded 20. Another interesting aspect of the early generations is the longevity of the characters before the Great Flood. These patriarchs had exceptionally long lives, far exceeding the modern concept of human lifespan. This phenomenon is particularly evident in the genealogies described in Genesis, where we see figures like Adam, Seth, and Methuselah living for hundreds of years. Adam, the first man, lived for 930 years, according to Genesis 5:5. His son Seth, born after Abel's death, played a crucial role in continuing the human lineage and lived to be 912 years old, as recorded in Genesis 5:8. Enosh, the grandson of Adam, lived for 905 years, Genesis 5:11. These examples show that in the early days of humanity, longevity was not the exception but the rule. Methuselah, Noah's grandfather, is known as the longest living person mentioned in the Bible, with a lifespan of 969 years, Genesis 5:27. Many theories have been proposed to explain this extraordinary longevity. One of the popular theories is the idea of a pristine, perfect environment, where climatic, atmospheric, and environmental conditions may have contributed to extended lifespans. According to this view, the atmosphere on Earth before the Great Flood may have provided additional protection against harmful radiation and other factors that typically contribute to aging. Other researchers suggest that the genetic makeup of the first humans was different and stronger, allowing them to live longer. Additionally, some biblical interpretations point to changes made by God or shifts in natural laws after the Great Flood. According to Genesis 6:3, God declared, "My spirit will not contend with humans forever, for they are mortal, their days will be 120 years." This statement may indicate that God intended to gradually reduce human lifespans after the Great Flood, which aligns with the gradual decrease in lifespan recorded in subsequent generations. After the Great Flood, the lifespans of biblical figures decreased significantly. For example, Abraham lived for 175 years, Genesis 25:7, and Moses, one of the most famous figures in the Old Testament, lived for 120 years, Deuteronomy 34:7. This decrease can be explained by various changes. A common explanation is that environmental changes after the Great Flood had a significant impact on lifespan. Another factor may have been the gradual decline in the genetic quality of subsequent generations due to marriages between close relatives. The decline in lifespan may also reflect changes in God's divine plan and in the conditions of humanity. Some scholars believe that God adjusted human lifespans to fit the new era and the realities of the post-flood world, where living too long was no longer necessary. In conclusion, when Cain thought about marriage, there were many sisters and nieces for him to choose from, making it not difficult for him to find a wife of the same bloodline. As previously mentioned, marriages between close relatives continued for a long period. It was only when the human population grew significantly that laws prohibiting sexual relations between close relatives were enacted to prevent negative consequences, such as genetic defects and health issues from inbreeding. The Bible clearly states that all humanity is descended from Adam and Eve, and any theory contrary to this lacks a biblical basis. As written in Acts 17:26, from one man he made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. This view clarifies the dynamics of relationships in the early days and the formation of humanity from the first couple. Another daughter of Adam and Eve mentioned in the book of Jubilees is Azura, who is believed to be the wife of Seth, the third son of Adam and Eve. Her name may be associated with blue sky or lapis lazuli, symbolizing heavenly purity, and her name reflects the uniqueness she represents in the story. As Seth's wife, Azura directly influenced the continuation of the righteous lineage, contributing to the preservation of desired virtues and values in the biblical genealogy. It is worth noting that Seth was born after Abel's death, and Eve believed that God had appointed Seth to replace Abel. According to traditions, Azura was initially Abel's wife, and after Abel's murder by Cain, she married Seth. From this marriage, prominent descendants were born. Among Seth's children, Enosh stands out, whose name means weak man. Enosh is known as the first to call upon the name of the Lord, creating a spiritual connection that became a central practice in later religious traditions. Additionally, Enoch, the son of Seth, is one of the prominent figures of this lineage. Enoch is known for his extraordinary closeness to God, to the point where he walked with God as described in the Bible. Enoch's righteous life and direct communion with God became a notable example of devotion, to the extent that he was one of the few who did not experience death, but was instead taken up to heaven with God. One of the most notable contributions of Seth's lineage is Noah, who built the ark during the Great Flood. Noah, the son of Lamech and grandson of Seth, was chosen by God to preserve humanity and the creatures during the global disaster. Noah's obedience and faith, recorded in the story of the Great Flood, highlight the importance of Seth's lineage in fulfilling God's salvation plan for humanity. Each individual in this lineage played a significant role in building the legacy of humanity and preserving faith and integrity amid the challenges their generations faced. Religious traditions, particularly when exploring the lineages of Cain and Abel, as opposed to Seth and Azura, provide an interesting symmetry in the human condition, reflected in moral and spiritual choices. Cain, the firstborn of Adam and Eve, had a journey tied to choices reflecting humanity's fall. In contrast, Seth and Azura's lineage offers a story of moral and spiritual choices more aligned with God's will. Although these two lineages are clearly different, they both hold their own significance and reflect the inherent opposition in the human condition, with moral and spiritual choices shaping the future of subsequent generations. Once again, I emphasize that the Book of Jubilees is considered a non-canonical text, meaning it is not officially recognized by mainstream religions, both Jewish and Christian. All information regarding the daughters of Adam and Eve may vary depending on different interpretations and religious beliefs. The Bible is a sacred book focused on important messages of faith and humanity's relationship with God. It is not intended to recount every detail or story of every individual, but focuses on core lessons and teachings for our spiritual and moral lives. God uses the Bible to show us what is most important: His love, His justice, and how He wants us to live. However, the Bible cannot encompass all details of human history or every individual. It is a guide to help us understand God and follow His ways, not to capture every aspect of life and history. God's plan is perfect, but it is also greater than we can fully understand. The Bible gives us a glimpse of God's love and justice, but does not reveal everything about His purpose. In Isaiah 55:8-9, we read, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." This means there are things about God and His plan that go beyond our understanding. God does not ask us to understand everything. He wants us to trust in Him and seek His love and guidance. The Bible is a gift to help us better understand God and live according to His teachings, even if we do not know every detail. Now, I would like to hear your opinion. Do you believe in the information presented in the Book of Jubilees, even though it is a non-canonical text? Who do you think was Cain's wife? Please leave your thoughts below and share your views with us. Your opinion is very important to us. Thank you for watching. Have a blessed day, and may God bless you.